Has it ever occurred to you that maybe you're a monster and don't know it yet? It's been this way as long as I could remember. Hungry grins and malicious gazes, always leering at me from a distance. It permeates like a foul odor. It was like I could see it whenever they were near. They weren't the only things to be wary of. Those that droned on as their willing cattle were equally disturbing. They didn't even have a face, just a smooth texture where their defining features should be. The unassuming fiends that served them through complacency churned my stomach comparably. They never seemed to notice me directly, but their stares seemed too calculated to not be aware of my contempt. Their presence in this world rendered me overly cautious of my surroundings. I could swear they loved to skulk around in the dark. I hadn't slept without a lamp on since I was 4, at least. I would venture to guess they corrupted my eyes too. I couldn't even look in a mirror without feeling off, staring at my reflection. I spent days begging my mom to get rid of the mirrors in our house, which she eventually obliged. It wasn't like I was insecure or anything. I would say I had above average looks even. But it was like something else was staring back at me whenever I looked into one. The point is, I don't like mirrors. The monsters robbed me of any peace I could hope for. This afternoon, I witnessed one of them eat another. I was in the hallway preparing for my trigonometry class when it happened. It was a clean bite through the mane of the other, and it gnawed at the mutilated flesh left from its assault. I would have felt bad if I didn't detest both of them so much. The crimson stains and cries of pain didn't seem to faze the flow of traffic much or prompt any actions. The fiends and drones all looked on in passive interest, some in delicious delight. This was common. I saw it frequently. They would weasel in to get close to you, pretend to be kind, then go for the jugular. As if there wasn't already the thought of me being eaten by one of them already, I usually stuck to myself and avoided prompting their interest. I could at least squeak by like that. It wasn't all too bad. I at least had a few friends that warded the isolation away. Jacob, Dana, and Kate. They weren't perfect, per se. They had a few features reminiscent of the fiends, although there were an acceptable compromise. Some of them had fangs and stray black quills. The others had beast-like ears and wide facial features, like an ox. Jacob even had a deep howl to his laugh, if you could make him laugh, that is. I was convinced they wouldn't hurt me or become like the others, so I decided to get close to them. Years passed and I made it to graduation. It was no surprise I jumped straight into working to support myself financially. I couldn't imagine going to college, where I would have to subject myself to more isolation, just as before. I'd probably just end up in debt, or worse. I took an office job where I would only have to worry about occasionally seeing the faceless sycophants every so often. Otherwise, I was left in peace. Dana had moved away. She wanted to take her shot at the big city. Cain and Jacob stayed, attending college. I didn't see them nearly as often now. Their studies took up a lot of their time. We still met up every other weekend or so at least. It helped with avoiding being alone too often. I saved up enough money within months of me getting my job and planned to move out. Not that my mom and dad didn't accommodate me, but it was hard staring at their faces every day. I was meeting a man that evening, an owner of a small home west of the city. It was distance apart from the neighbors, by about a mile in each direction, which was perfect. It was priced cheaper than many others, likely due to how far out it was and how long it sat unoccupied. I drove my beat-up wagon over to the property. admiring the green fields and lack of busy centers I was accustomed to seeing my entire life. I arrived to see a plain but cozy-looking home that had seen better days. Chipped white paint revealed the musty wood underneath, along with numerous cracks and chips in the brick porch. It had a spacious yard that was overgrown. I liked it, cosmetics aside. I parked in front of the white picket fence before circling a rusted metal chain link fence. There was nothing but land on either side unoccupied. The man I met was an impish-looking fellow. I stepped out of my car to see it waiting on the porch, leaning against one of the posts. It perked its beady eyes toward me, causing me to hesitate for a moment. I was visibly put off, but it seemed to chuckle at my discomfort.
Don't mind the paint. We can get that touched up. Ready to see the inside?
It spoke melodiously. I swallowed, trying to ease my nerves before placing my hands behind my back. At least I was bigger than the thing, if it decided to try to attack me. It extended bony fingers wrapped in thin purple skin, like that of a shriveled balloon. I shook my head in refusal at the offer. It pursed its lips, nodding in what I assumed was understanding.
Shy?
I get it. It spoke, offering awkward sympathy. It seemed annoyed, however. The imp creature led me into the house. The floorboards, surprisingly, weren't creaking. They at least seemed well kept, with some life left to their sheen. The kitchen was normal, and the rustic charm of the interior was welcoming. No major red flags were apparent to me. It made a few side comments that I tuned out, nodding to not entirely ignore it. We reached the entrance to what seemed to be a basement. It wasn't uncommon, given the region was known for tornadoes. I found myself paralyzed, staring down the stairwell to see only darkness.
And there's the basement,
it stated. Its voice snapped me out of my trance. I glanced at it briefly, only to nod my head in refusal. Here I had thought I outgrew my fear of the dark. Yet, that darkness was different than the shade I had grown accustomed to. No, I don't need to see it. I insisted before pointing down the hall, seeing a mirror that was mounted to one of the walls. I'm interested in renting it, so long as you get rid of the mirrors lingering in the house. I countered with, as to not have the tour drag on any longer. It was enough for me, flaws aside. The appliances worked and things were good enough for me to overlook the cosmetic shortcomings. The imp creature seemed perplexed, but the look was replaced with a smile as it nodded eagerly.
We'll sign the paperwork and get your security deposit and move forth with the rest of it. The mirrors will be gone by your move-in date,
he confirmed. I gave the basement a passing glance and swallowed, nodding affirmatively. I didn't waste much time filling the application out before leaving. 2 weeks later, I moved in. Kane helped me deep clean the place the day prior. Both he and Jacob helped move my limited furniture in and even accompanied me to get necessities for the rest of the house. It was a long day of moving things in and doing odd chores, but throughout the moving process, nobody dared to venture into the basement. It was 7 in the evening, and the summer sun slowly dropped in the sky, which gave some clearance for Kane and Jacob to have a better drive home. Usually, we would have hung out, but we agreed we were all tired from the day of driving and moving my furniture in. Thanks again for the help, guys. I appreciate it, and for taking the truck back. I started. Jacob gestured to the truck, Kane already making his way to the other side of it.
No problem, dude. We're heading back to town anyway, so might as well give you time to settle in.
He spoke, his words tapering off into a yawn. As both entered the truck and clasped in, I planted my hand firmly on the door,
fingers curling over the slot where the window was rolled down. I furrowed my brow, giving him a look of concern. "You sure you don't want to just stay over tonight? I know you have the stuff to do tomorrow and all, but it's not safe to drive while tired either," I voiced. Jacob's lips widened as he began to snicker, his whiskers bouncing as he shook his head side to side. "Nah, man, gotta go. I've got Kane to help keep me through the ride if anything. Dangerous world and all, sure, but I'm good." He spoke with certainty, prompting me to believe him. He peeled my fingers off the door, his claws pricking the back of my palm by accident. He clasped his other clawed hand over my hand carefully, giving a wry smile. "Smell you later. Get some rest." I took a step back, removing my hand from his. I grit my teeth with a grin to deal with the stinging while not alerting him of my discomfort. Jacob retracted his hand into the cabin and pulled off into the night, leaving me solemnly thinking for a few seconds. A few moments later, I dragged myself inside, exhaustion washing over me as I yawned. I coaxed myself into saving the rest of the unpacking for tomorrow. I had the decency to at least get my bed set up before anything else. For now, I was content to just drop dead on my mattress. As I walked down the hall toward my bedroom, I swore I heard a grumble. It was brief and disruptive, just enough to snatch my attention, but ambiguous enough to dismiss after a few moments of silence. It sounded like it came from the basement, which I had the sense to shut the door to earlier. I wouldn't be heading down there anytime soon, creepy noises or not. The next morning, I woke up, my eyes struggling to adjust as I looked out the window, being met with the faint light of dawn. I stretched out, beginning to mutter to myself as I stood on unsteady legs and stumbled to the bathroom. My head was ringing, and my eyes hurt to keep open past a squint. I thought to just go and wash my face and get started with the unpacking ahead of me. My hand flicked up, smacking the light switch and causing the bulb to cast yellow light through the dainty room. When I looked up, I saw deranged red eyes staring back at me in the mirror. I jumped, my back slamming against the ajar door behind me. My heart thumped with the shock. I stared into the mirror to see my normal eyes looking back at me again. What was it I had seen just now? While I usually never had a problem with bathroom mirrors for short bursts, I never saw anything as feverishly sickening as that. I composed my breath, shaking my head before turning on the faucet. I splashed cold water on my face before shutting the light off and leaving. I decided I would just ignore it for now. I must have still been tired when I saw that, or maybe the light distorted my vision for a few moments and I imagined it. A week went by since the move, and some semblance of normalcy was finally established. Maybe I still had a few boxes I neglected to unpack, but my rented home was functional and just a tad bit familiar with my touches. I finished up my workday and settled to meet Kane and Jacob for lunch. It was a bit of a verbal tug-of-war at first, but we relented to getting burgers from a truck we were familiar with. When I first arrived at the plaza featuring said truck, I parked and pulled my phone from my pocket to text the group. Suddenly, I was greeted by a heavy thud of hands pressing into the hood of my car, causing my heart to skip a beat. Fangs greeted me with Jacob's grin. "Hey, caught you slacking again," he teased, his voice deeper than I last recalled. Jacob hadn't always been so monstrous looking. I could only stare in disbelief with a rising pit in my stomach. When Jacob stepped back, I got out of the car, looking up at him with a rising sense of urgency. "Jacob, what the heck, dude? Why do you look like that?" I gasped. He cocked an eyebrow at me, his bushier brows and angular features actively distorting from their usual image. The lines on his face twitched and widened. His gums protruded from his lips, pronouncing his teeth further. His eyes dilated as they stared at me, their focus intense. "What are you on about, dude? I don't see how I look any different, Jacob retorted. I could tell he was agitated, as prevalent with how that wolfish maw of his contorted in annoyance. As Jacob looked down at me, his claws ominously extended from their sockets. With how much he was morphing before my eyes, it was like this was his sick way of toying with me. My eyes were glued to his monstrous digits, filling me with anxiety. Yo, what's going on? A somewhat familiar voice called out. Kane strolled up to my car, his large face protruding with a muzzle and an obscenely square nose reminiscent of an ox. His eyes were now devoid of their whites, and long unruly hair spilled out of the gaps in his clothes. My two friends were no longer human, their appearances now heart-wrenchingly indistinguishable from the other various monsters. I gulped as I backed up to my car. Kane stepped towards me with his heavy hooves scraping the sidewalk, following his movements. You guys look just like them, I hissed hoarsely. Eyes were drawn from the foot traffic around us all of a sudden. Jacob reached his hand forward, holding his palm out towards me. Calm down. Nothing is different about... I slapped his hand away from me, throwing my head back as my eyes widened. Don't touch me! I spat. Suddenly, he grabbed my shoulder, his claws sinking into me with a wide grip along my chest, shoulders, and upper back. Calm down! He demanded, as if realizing what he had done when he saw the wince of pain and tears welling in my eyes. His grip eased. His eyes narrowed as he saw his blood-covered claws slowly easing out of me. It stung, both physically and emotionally. The fact my only friends were now monsters, and Jacob even attacked me. My head throbbed, my heart paraded in my chest. A salty taste seeped into my mouth from my falling tears. Jacob stared on in disbelief, my vision blurred by tears as I saw a malicious grin form on his face, and a dull ringing found itself in my ears as his ravenous gaze assaulted me. Go home. Obviously something has gotten into you. He hissed at me in a hushed tone. I was petrified, staring onward, my feet feeling like they were glued to the floor. Jacob growled. Go now! Jacob's deepening voice howled at me. That's enough, Jacob! Can't you see they're fucking terrified? Kane spat. However, I didn't stick around to listen to them argue. I mustered all the strength I had into my body, tugging from Jacob's fiendish reach. I opened my car door and threw myself inside. Before I could even wipe the tears from my eyes, I was halfway down the road, driving home with panicked breathing. When I made it home, I peeled myself out of the seat, noticing I had saturated the surface with blood from the uncovered wounds. The bleeding didn't seem too bad upon further inspection. Nothing alcohol, gauze, and bandaging couldn't heal. Once I was patched up, I changed shirts, tossing the torn one out. It all hit me when I sat down at my desk, my throbbing head announcing its assault, before I broke down into a fit of sobs. Jacob and Kane were my only friends, and even they too found themselves subject to the cruel fate of this world. They were monsters like everybody else. I didn't know what else to do now, but my fingers fumbled with my phone and I scrolled through my contacts list. After minutes of debating with myself, I called my dad. As complicit as he was, who else could I turn to for comfort? I explained the situation to him, as scattered as it was, struggling to compose myself throughout. Jacob hurt me. He looked more monstrous than the last time we saw each other. I spoke in a low voice. Jacob's always been a monster. I've told you some just are, he said. Not as much as today, I interjected. Why? Why would he hurt me? It was messed up. Not like cops would do anything about it either. They'd probably side with him. Calm down. You didn't tick him off, right? Maybe you're the one who's becoming monstrous. He trailed. That sinking pit returned to my stomach. Another grim reminder of my reason for moving out. My jaw went slack as I recounted the same reevaluation I came to about my mom and dad a long time ago. My dad was a faceless man that regularly offered himself up to the monsters he served. He was missing his entire left hand now, and probably would be missing his right hand soon too. What possibly good advice would I have expected from him?
Hello?
His voice rang through the phone. I hung up, turned the phone off, then chucked it straight into the wall. It bounced off the drywall and slapped against the floor with a crackle to accompany the impact. I didn't care anymore. No one to call, and distractions meant nothing to me now. My jaws tightened as my teeth ground against one another in frustration. What now? With nothing else to do, I tossed myself on my bed, pushing my face against the pillow to ruminate in comfort. Night settled in and the once bright hue from outside dimmed, swallowing my room in darkness. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision as I snapped out of my concentration. How much time had passed? Not that I could check due to the state of my phone. A creeping regret hit me when I realized I no longer had a usable phone, feeling like I had a stack of bricks weighing me down. I slowly rose from the bed. I walked over to the door, flicking on the light to look around at my still empty room. It settled in just how painful my shoulder still was. The marks where Jacob's claw had pierced were swollen beneath my shirt. I took a deep breath, left my room, and headed to the kitchen. I traversed the dark hallway to the kitchen, my hands feeling the wall for the light switch. I felt my stomach grumble angrily since I skipped lunch earlier. As soon as I gripped the door handle of the fridge, I felt a chill go up my spine and swung my head around. I saw nothing at first moving through the house. Suddenly, shallow breathing kissed my ear, and I swung around to face the opposite way. I couldn't see anything, not even a brief glimpse. I stood straight and my breathing quickened. "Who's there?" I called out. Seconds of my startled breathing filled the silence. I faced my refrigerator again, content to say I was just paranoid upon waking up from my nap. "You." A raspy whisper echoed. A faint tickle of cold air brushed my ear. I let out a yelp and fumbled out of the kitchen in a hurry. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept next to my couch, swinging my head around wildly to look for the source of the sound. "What are you?" I shouted, mustering the courage to sound more threatening than I was. It wouldn't be unheard of for smaller monsters to stalk prey, and if this was one, I would give it one hell of a fight. However, there was no usual precursor of a monster being present, no odor or sight of it. After frantically searching, my nerves were thoroughly racked with confusion and panic. "Just you." The same hollow whisper found my ear. I flailed my baseball bat around, running out of breath after a moment of hitting nothing. I stopped hearing the voice after that. No matter how much I called out and cursed at it, I sat there on my couch, thinking to myself for a bit before slowly going back to what I was doing before. I wanted to forget this day so badly now, unsure of what the hell was going on. I wish I could say those whispers stopped. They only became worse over the coming weeks. They berated and called me awful things, even when I was about to sleep. They were always just surreal enough to not make me call the police. Not that they'd show up anyway. The last thing I wanted was to be admitted to a psych ward or be a sitting duck to the ghouls inside. I tried everything to make them stop. If I left the house, they'd follow me. If I played music, the whispers would get louder. If I took sleeping medicine, I'd have terrible nightmares. It was evident these whispers were malicious, and I was agitating them further. They wanted something from me. It was nighttime now, and I kept my lights on while drinking tea to help me sleep. I could feel the bags under my eyes from my sleep deprivation. My vision was grainy, and I even began to call off work due to how much I was deteriorating mentally. It took a lot of mental energy just to hold myself together around others, and I just wasn't up to it anymore. Monster. Prey.
Monster or prey? You are prey! Prey! Prey!
The whispers grew progressively louder as they mocked me. My head rang heavily as I paced around my room throughout the barrage of insults.
Shut up!
I shouted. I bit my lips so hard that I drew blood. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw my head against the nearest wall, repeatedly bashing it until my forehead was thoroughly bruised. I stumbled back dizzily. The images of my eyes slowly came together, and I noticed that there were numerous shadows now dancing around the room. All of them loomed ominously, taking on shapes briefly before melting away once more. The shadows jittered with the whispers, further adding to the panic coursing through me. I yelped, running out of my room hurriedly, but noticed that there was something at the end of the hallway. A large shadow rose, and beady red eyes glared at me from its indescribable form. I tripped, falling back as it stared into me. I never felt so horrified by any monster in my life. Seeing this thing now invading my home, was I the prey? The eyes didn't seem hungry, but I wasn't going to stay on the ground to find out what it wanted from me. I had nowhere else to run, nowhere except the basement. I hadn't gone into it ever since I moved in. I didn't store any of my belongings there, and I never so much as touched the doorknob with the intent to enter. Unfortunately, I had no choice now. I sprinted back to the door to the basement and swung it open, quickly shutting it behind me. Silence. The whispers had stopped, and everything went quiet. I locked the door with the chain that was installed on the top right, now slowly stumbling down the old wooden stair until I reached the bottom. I turned the light on with my jittery hands, still shaken up. As light erupted from the old dusty light bulb in the center of the ceiling, I could make out the brick walls and a few covered objects kept in here by the owner. I sucked my bottom lip in, taking a deep breath to calm myself down a bit. As I did this, I could taste a savory sweetness in my mouth, which confused me more than anything. Why was there an intoxicatingly sweet taste in my mouth? I reached up, brushing my thumb against my lip before seeing blood stain my skin. I stared in disbelief, wondering why my blood tasted good. My eyes raised to land on the covered objects in the room, and I walked over to one of them, removing the sheets in a swift motion. I froze, tears welling in my eyes and my face glistening with sweat. I was staring at mirrors, the previous mirrors that had been throughout the house before I moved in. But what truly disturbed me and caused me to freeze up was my reflection. Monstrous red eyes stared back at me. My agape mouth showed various fangs and a forked tongue. Scales were protruding from my flaking skin. My hair seemed like it was beginning to fall out now, with wild locks sprawled thinly atop my scalp. My flesh seemed pale and leathery, with how it crinkled and folded in my frame, sickly in its pigmentation and luster. My iris dilated, showing a hunger previously unnoticed by me. I felt hungry. When had I been so hungry? Distorted sobs left my throat in low croaks, my legs given from the weight as I fell to my knees. I couldn't look away. My eyes locked on the image before me. The irony wasn't lost on me, a man who abhors monsters becoming one. Had I been infected? There was no way I could be a monster. When I looked down at my hands, all I saw were leathery digits and claws caked in a yellow hue. I shut my eyes, a shaky sob escaping. You were the one who was becoming monstrous, my father's words echoed. It occurred to me, the world around me leading up to this point and how I had seen it. What separated me from the others? I was different, right? I couldn't be a monster. But what if the monsters felt that way too? What is a monster to another monster? We defend ourselves in times of strife and attack others when they threaten our safety. To an onlooker, this could appear bad, but to ourselves, it was more than justified. Was I justified? With Cain and Jacob, what had I looked like to them? My face dried, my despondent look evident in the mirror, but I felt it much more inside. Questions pommeled me, but I knew it would be futile to try to answer them. I couldn't trust my thoughts anymore. I never should have to begin with. I dragged myself up the staircase, opening the door, ready to face whatever lay beyond. Not a peep. No whispers or shadows mocked me. No monsters waiting outside. Just me. I never did go back to normal after that, whatever that truly meant. I stayed this fiendish gray color with claws and fangs. I stayed a monster. Or perhaps I always was one. It didn't matter anymore. It felt strangely alleviating to have the mystery resolved, to have something new to work towards. I had to carry on somehow. I wasn't treated differently when I went back to work. It had been the same as before. My boss greeted me amicably and welcomed me back. My coworkers joked that I looked like $1,000,000. I assumed they were joking. I chuckled happily for the first time in a long time. It certainly felt good to see friendly faces. For the first time since I could remember, I saw actual faces. My coworkers, whom I once considered mindless drones, had faces, vibrant and dull alike. It was the full spectrum of expressions for me to appreciate. I smiled a bit, making my way to my desk to begin my day. After work, I went and got another cell phone, having destroyed my previous one. It was easy enough to set up the new one, with the backup of my data to use. I set it up when I got home. Once I had everything functional, I found myself staring at my contacts list again. It didn't take long for me to find my thumb hovering over Jacob's contact, my desire to call him surfacing. The longer I stared, I felt as if something else stared back at me. My reflection beckoned on the blacks of the screen, vicious red eyes reflecting with no hunger or insidious intent. I hit call and prayed for the best. After what felt like an eternity of ringing, he answered, and I couldn't contain my smile. "Jacob," I began. He interrupted. "You feeling better? I was worried. Sorry, I got a bit ticked off. No, I interrupted with a stifled laugh. I was off my rockers, dude. I should be apologizing, I protested with an escaping laugh. After the amends, we spoke for what felt like hours. We laughed and joked as per usual in our conversations. At one point, I let out a sigh of relief. "You know, I'm glad you answered." "Been there, done that, dude. Trust me, everybody has their moments with these things. It's just as my dad always said. Be careful gazing into the abyss, because the abyss gazes back."